We are gonna see how many fantasy books by authors of color I can finish reading in the next 24 hours. This is my current TBR stack. Admittedly, it may change as we go along, but I do plan on starting with the fantasy romance An Arrow to the Moon by Emily X.R. Pan, and I'll tell you a little bit more about it once I actually get into it. It is 8 a.m. now, and I have until 8 a.m. tomorrow to tackle as many books on my TBR, and the 24-hour countdown begins now. Okay, so I have started An Arrow to the Moon by Emily X.R. Pan, and I guess I didn't know what I was expecting. I think I was expecting it to be a little bit more fantasy than it is. It definitely has some of the Romeo and Juliet qualities, but not entirely. It's a lot more urban fantasy than it is more traditional fantasy, but it does have these interesting, like, things sprinkled in, as it says that on the back, that this is a Romeo and Juliet meets Chinese mythology mashup going on. I see that, I do feel that, but I guess I was just hoping that it would be a little bit more mythology fantasy-esque. So it's an interesting mix. I am enjoying it, even though the romance aspect of it is not necessarily my favorite. I don't know, I don't fully know how I feel, is I guess the reality. So I'll have to read more before I can give you a more realistic feelings towards this whole thing. I don't know. We have 22 hours remaining, and I did get a little bit distracted during reading. My mom ended up calling me, so I lost a little bit of time, but for the most part, we're pretty on top of things. I am more than halfway through An Arrow to the Moon by Emily X.R. Pan. Struggling to tell you how I feel, but I am enjoying it to some degree. We'll see if it keeps me feeling this way. I'll give you an update when I finish. So, how much time has gone by? I believe we have 20 hours left at this point. So 4 hours have passed. I have finished the first book, An Arrow to the Moon. How do I feel about this? I don't know. I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it more for the story than the romance, but then there were some interesting things that happened. I'm not sure how I feel. Right now, I'm thinking a high 3 stars, low 4. That's what I'm thinking. It was good. I wasn't necessarily the right audience, which is why I'm probably going to bump up the rating to the 4 stars. But there were some things about it that I really liked. I liked some of the mythology. I liked the way it ended. Although I was feeling confused about that, like, it's good, I guess. I don't know, it's hard to say. That does mean that we have completed our first book for this challenge, so yay. But that does mean that we need to start on the next book, which is at this point Star Daughter. I do want to get these out of the way because they are tabletop TBR picks for the month, which is my game that I play every month to pick out my TBR. So I definitely want to get the points for completing these. So I think I'm going to jump into this one next. There is an audio for it on Scribd. I think while I'm listening to the audiobook for this, I'm gonna go for a walk and enjoy a little walk around, you know? I will catch you later. After I've jumped into this, I'll let you know what it's about.
Stopping by just to tell you I hope that you understand why these things on my mind keep me up at night. Maybe you are the answer, but lately I'm so alone, stuck cold.
updates for Stardaughter. I have been back from my walk for a little while. We are now 18 hours into this challenge. We've only completed one book so far, and I'm not even halfway through the next one, unfortunately. I have been listening to the audiobook via Scribd, but I really don't recommend Scribd because it has on multiple occasions just skipped like pages worth of the book. I don't know why. This is a regular thing that seems to happen when I listen to their books, so I'm starting to think that it's not worth their prices to get their audiobooks if you're just gonna be losing part of the experience because there's something wrong, like they're always corrupt or something. So that's a bummer, but I have been enjoying going back and like reading the parts that are missed. I think I'm just gonna continue reading with my eyeballs for most of this moving forward. I might listen to the audiobook in addition, but obviously anytime something like this happens, I have to just read it with my eyeballs. So that's a thing. I don't think I've mentioned what this is about so far. So we have a girl who is basically born of the stars, right? So she's half human, half star goddess, and something ends up happening, and to try and work things out, she needs to go to her star ancestors to ask for help, and it turns out that there's this big event that's happening, and she's gonna have to try and navigate that somehow. And at this point, we are being introduced to said event and kind of experiencing a lot of this stuff along with our, you know, half goddess. And I'm finding it very interesting and very enjoyable. This is the biggest book that we're going to be reading so far. The next two ones that I am thinking about are a little bit on the shorter side because I am feeling a little bit nervous about how long it's going to take me to get through this since we only have 18 hours left. I feel like time is going by so fast. Like I just started and we're already through like 6 hours. How did that happen? But yeah, I am enjoying this so far. I'm gonna continue reading and I will give you an update when I am either further through or hopefully done. Fingers crossed I can get through this bad boy. Hello, hi, I have a problem. We are with 13 hours left of this challenge and I am almost done with Stardaughter. I have mostly been enjoying this, even though there are some YA tropes in here that I'm not a big fan of. And I've been a little bit confused at times, but that actually, for the most part, has nothing to do with the book, or at least as far as I can tell. Instead, it has to do with the audio service that I was using, which, as I mentioned earlier, is Scribd. I do not recommend them. Do not use them. I have only really had bad experience with this place, and this one has gotten me to unsubscribe. I don't care if they have access to books that I don't have access to from my library, because there's usually enough issues with the audiobooks when listening to it via their service that it's not worth it. And for all of the audiobooks that I have completed and been like, yeah, I don't think there's a problem with that, I don't know if that's true. I don't know how many of them I just didn't notice the problem, because in some cases it's not super noticeable. In this one, several times it was. This one's probably one of the worst audiobooks that I've gotten from Scribd ever. But at least that I've continued with, because right off the bat, a couple of chapters into it, it just skipped 9 pages. Then several chapters after that, it skipped 18 pages. Now, I ended up going back in and reading them, but since then, it has jumped around, like taken parts from the future and plopped them in places that it didn't belong. And then later, I would re-listen to that chapter at the correct location. And now I'm not sure how many other times I have just lost information because it just randomly cuts it out, and how many times I've gotten information from the wrong place. Now, twice I have re-listened to a part that was dropped in at a section it wasn't supposed to be. So at least twice we have had that happen. And I think we've had it happen at least a third time, but since I haven't finished it yet, I don't know if I'll be re-listening to it again or if it's just gonna be missing. I don't know. But this is the worst experience I've had because, as you can imagine, I am learning things that I'm not supposed to learn until later, and then going back to the character not knowing this and experiencing them not knowing something that I just learned because Scribd hates its users. And you might be like, oh, it's just a one-off. Well, that happened with this book as well. Goddess of Filth by V. Castro. This book, within the first paragraph, it basically cuts out the rest of the very important intro and then drops in a bit from the future. And it doesn't continue back where it started. So I ended up not listening to the audiobook after that and ended up reading it physically and had a great time. But that it was a clear and significant issue with this audiobook. Then in addition to that, I recently listened to Grown, and although for the most part this was listenable, it did just randomly cut out where I would lose a couple of sentences randomly several times throughout the book. And I went back and checked, and I did in fact, when it went silent for like 5, 6, 7 seconds, I would continue reading, and then when it stopped being silent, it would pick up after a couple of sentences. So you would just lose that. Now, fortunately, that was so small in the grand scheme of things that you were still able to get all of the information, and it was still relatively enjoyable. Now, I'm pretty sure this has happened with other books that I have read from them as well, but it wasn't so noticeable that I was confused in a way that made the book unenjoyable. But now I'm just wondering, how many books have I listened to via their service that I just missed paragraphs, pages, chapters, and didn't realize it? It's not worth it. I canceled them, not using them. Now I need to figure out what I'm going to do for this challenge. That being said, it is dinner time, so I'm gonna take a break, figure out what I'm gonna do, and I'll be back when I decide. So we're still only at one book right now. Hopefully I'll have a decision. Okay, we currently are at 13 hours and counting down. We are almost to the halfway point of the challenge, and I have finally finished book number 2. I don't know why I decided to read chonkers for a challenge where I'm trying to read as much as I can, but it worked out that way, okay? Like, don't at me. This one, as I mentioned, was a struggle because of the Scribd audio file being absolute trash. But regardless of that, I still actually enjoyed this, surprisingly. Even though there were some parts that were confusing, there were some YA elements that I in general am not a fan of, but is to be expected in a YA novel. So yeah, those things were there, but I did like the overall story and the competition-y type thing, which I kind of wish there was more of. And you know, there were just some elements in here that was happening, but like, I don't really want to say too much because some of the things that I might have a problem with could just 100% be because of the trash audiobook file from Scribd. That being said, I did start book number 3, which unfortunately is another chonker, but I don't have the audiobooks for any of my shorter fantasy novels by POC authors, so this is what we're going with. And I'm excited because I'm a huge fan of Peeta Jelly Clark. So this is a master of Jinn, and as far as I'm aware, I am not far enough into this to really know for sure, but I think we're following the perspective of some kind of detective in this sort of steampunk futuristic fantasy world. And there have already been a couple of things, nobles, problems, rebellions, I don't know. We're in the setup phase, and I usually find that, especially for like a high fantasy or epic fantasy situation, where it takes me a while to get into it. So I'm gonna try and listen to some more of this audiobook, get further into this. I guess unless I end up hating this, but I don't think that's going to be the case. I'm almost 100% sure that we're going to finish this no problem. And then the question is, what are we going to do to try and fit in another book? Because like I said, I don't really have any skinny boys. I don't have any skinny boys. Both of these are chunkers and they're gonna take a long time for me to get through. So unless I don't sleep, which is like not an option, because I'm struggling already and it's not even my bedtime yet. But yeah, I don't know. We will see. I will hopefully wake up really early and be able to dive in. And like I said, I'm gonna try and listen to some more of this tonight. But I don't think I'm gonna give you another update until tomorrow because I am struggling right now. I think I'm ready for a nap. But yeah, that's where we're at. I will catch you in the next clip. Good morning. It is currently 2 a.m., which means that we have 6 hours remaining, and I still have a good chunk of this book to get through. So I'm not sure if I'm going to be able to finish anything in addition to this book, but I still think we're gonna be able to finish this one. I did start dozing off while I was listening to the audiobook last night, so I am going to have to rewind a bit and figure out where I left off. But so far, I'm finding this relatively interesting because we have this fantastical world, but then we have like this modern-esque detective, and I think that's great. That's a lot of fun. I don't know exactly how far this fantastical world kind of like pushes the limits and how fantastical it is. It does have some elements that we've seen so far, but you know, it does have some normal elements as well. But yeah, I definitely need to re-catch up on some stuff, and I will give you an update when I am a little bit more familiar with what's going on, because I don't actually think I got that far last night. So that's what we're doing. It is currently 6:38, which means we have 1 hour, a little over 1 hour left in this challenge, and I have finished the last book, which is A Master of Jinn by P. Djeli Clark. This was a fun time. I actually really enjoyed this. This has like a modern detective feel, but in this fantastical world. Obviously, there's this big ordeal with Jinn and a master of them and a mystery and a big showdown. But yeah, I really enjoyed it. So I think this one's a solid 4-star. I think that means we were pretty successful with this reading challenge. I ended up reading several chunkers. Like, I was originally planning on reading some thin boys, but we got 3 books done. And for the most part, I enjoyed myself. I did struggle quite a bit with this book, which is very unfortunate to the book itself because it had nothing to do with the book, but I had a good time with the story, a bad time with the audio via Scribd. And then fortunately, I had the audio for these available at my library, so I was able to listen to unmessed up versions. But yeah, I really enjoyed this. So we have a 4-star. This one's a high 3-star that I think I'm putting as a 4-star. And then this one I'm not rating because even though I did enjoy it, I have to reread it to make sure that I get everything and have a proper feel for the book, since I have no clue how much of the book was messed up by the audio, how much I lost, how much was misrepresented by the fact that things were out of order. I don't know. Regardless, I hope you enjoyed joining me on this journey. I was relatively successful. We at least finished some of my tabletop TBR picks. I ended up reading a book that I've been wanting to read for a while, and I'm excited to look into the next one of the series, although that one I think is more of a novella than a full-length novel, but we'll see. We'll see. If you have any other suggestions for fantasy books by authors of color that you think I should check out, let me know and I'll try and catch them in a future video. Otherwise, thank you for joining me. Hope you have a fantastic rest of your day, and I will catch you in the next video. Until then, bye!